Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Welcome back to There's No Business Like. I am here with my friends, Danielle, the Closet Octopus.
Oh, hey, it's Danielle Van Hook from the Alden in McLean, Virginia.
Type A, Katie Miller.
That's true. Hi, everyone. Katie Miller from Michigan Maven Creative Associates in Midland, Michigan.
Daddy, Brian Zelmer.
Brian Zelmer from Bardavon Presents in Poughkeepsie, New York.
The man with the stash, Kevin Maynard.
Kevin Maynard coming at you from Tallahassee with opening nights at Florida State University.
I am excited for the interview that we've got. This one's going to be a little different because it is going to be in two parts. So make sure you tune in again next week. But before we get to that, what is everyone's favorite memory from APAP?
So I feel like we've talked about a lot of APAP memories before. So it may not be my favorite, although it might be my favorite. But just so I don't repeat myself, I'm going to go with a very late night hang in Josh Benson's hotel room when there was a whole bunch of us colleagues in there in what was not just his hotel room, but it was the Josh Benson podcast studio, New York division or whatever. Do you remember what did we call it?
No Business Like Studio, New York edition.
Anyway, there was a whole bunch of us colleagues there. The room was packed, and we just sat around the podcast equipment and just talked and laughed our heads off for hours. And it just was one of the most fun, like, stress relieving times ever, just where, you know, the world was happy and joyous. And I'm sure Katie doesn't remember because she fell asleep on the couch, but we all had a good time, the rest of us.
I don't remember what I had for dinner last night, so I have no idea if I've said this before or not on a podcast. But I love every year. Like, for me, APAP is showcases. Like, everybody kind of has their path at APAP. For me, it's just all about, like, how many showcases can I fit into one? You know, you might be surprised to learn this about me, but the youth and family showcase is always a highlight. And whenever I have to be there at very early in the morning, I'm usually a little bit grouchy at the people who planned it. But then I get there and I'm just like surrounded by colleagues who are all, when it's suggested by the artist to put their hands up in the air and act like a tree, it's like a tiny hotel conference room of all my favorite people pretending to be trees.
I don't think I've told this story on the podcast, but one of my favorite APAP memories was one of my first APAPs. We went to go see a show at New World Stages. And there was a misprint in the APAP booklet that year. And so the show that we were going to see didn't start at 7. It actually started at 9:30. So we couldn't get in to see that show. But we went outside and I was standing there. We were kind of like regrouping. There was 5 of us figuring out where to go to next or what we were going to do. And I look over and I see the sign for the Gazillion Bubble Show. And I said very enthusiastically, I want to see the Gazillion Bubble Show. And this little Asian lady comes up. She goes, you want to see the Bubble Show? She goes, she goes, I have 6 tickets. There are 5 of you and 1 of me. And we became instant friends. And we went and saw the Gazillion Bubble Show. And my mind was blown. It was one of the most fun times that I had. And she was also very excited because she was telling us, she goes, I never get to use all my tickets. She goes, I support this theater and I always have extras.
Aww.
And so it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, the first APAP the 5 of us spent together, I think is probably my favorite APAP of all time. But I think my very first one just has a lot of fun memories for me. I did the Emerging Leaders Institute program in 2018. And so that was an amazing learning experience. And there were some professional development sessions that year at that conference that I think it was Kismet that I was supposed to be at that conference because it seemed like every single PD session that year was specifically designed to help me start my new role at Midland Center for the Arts because I was transitioning and almost immediately following that conference to Midland. I learned so much and met so many amazing people that time around. So I'm really grateful that was like a great launch to my new role. And we had the ELI folks, we went to some weird places in our off hours and had some great adventures together, like very cool hole in the wall restaurants and like out late at night together. And it was a really great time.
For me, mine includes none of you or a time that I even really knew many of you. But I came into APAP, flew in early. Right after I got to the hotel, a crazy snowstorm started and it dropped 14 inches of snow in like 2 hours and it shut down the airports. It shut down the entire city. And I walked out from the Hilton and there were no tire tracks in the street. All the streets were perfect snow. There was no one anywhere. There were no cars anywhere. It was like a completely deserted ghost town in the middle of Manhattan. In my mind, I can't remember if it's the same time or a different time that it was also snowy, but I went to Times Square at like 2 a.m. and it was only foreign travel groups that were there. And so no one was speaking English. And it was all of the screens flashing and changing and all the languages happening around me. And I was just sitting, just absorbing it in this crazy, amazing, surreal moment. And that's my personal favorite memory of APAP. But the reason we're talking about APAP is that this week we sat down with Lisa Richards Toney, the president and CEO of APAP. And we're going to go to the first part of that interview now. And then you'll hear from us again after that next week.
Lisa Richards Toney, President and CEO of the Association of Performing Arts Professionals, also known as APAP.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for joining us today. Welcome to There's No Business Like. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you, Josh. I'm happy to be here.
Let me just ask, give me a very brief history of how the arts touched your life and how you got involved in the arts and then became a professional in the arts.
How much time do I have?
Let's say 3 minutes on that one.
Okay. I'm a native Washingtonian. I grew up here in Washington, D.C. in the 80s. And I'll say this. I was so shy as a child. My mom was not pleased with that, and neither was I. And so she really pushed me to try to do something in the arts. She believed that that it would do all the things that we know arts education does for young people. That was my life, right? And so I joined this organization called DC Youth Ensemble when I was 12. Now, I had been doing some things before that, but it was all kind of, just here and there. And I joined this organization, and it was during the summer when I joined, and it was a part of a summer work experience that the mayor had set up at the time. And so I was getting paid. I was learning things that I wanted to learn. I was taking dance classes, theater classes, acting classes, and we were supposed to put on this show at the end of it all. The show that we put on was called Save the Children. It was an originally devised piece by the students, and we were all like middle school, high school students. And it was probably 50, 60, 70 of us, maybe. It was a lot of kids. And, Washington, D.C. is a city, and we've got all kinds of people in the city. Now, I certainly didn't grow up in a way that was so underprivileged by any stretch of the imagination. But because I was so shy and really had not found that confidence in myself, I was underprivileged in terms of not really knowing that. So this whole piece, Save Our Children, was about saving our children from the streets at that time of Washington and other cities because there was a crisis. But there was also a saving going on with me so that I could actually, come to life and really come into who I was capable of being. That was a very pivotal experience for me. And from there, I just started. I was very lucky. I continued my training. I always say my mentor, the director of DC Youth Ensemble, Carol Foster, she let me sit at her desk. And what that means is that she let me sit at her desk. I would play with all the notebooks, the contracts. I was looking at everything. And I made a mess of some stuff too, but she let me make a mess. She let me fail. She picked me back up. She let me try again. I went to Spelman College. I majored in theater and in English. I was working in the space of, I wanted to be an actress maybe, or a director. I love stage directing. We got to Erder auditions, University Repertory Theater auditions, getting ready for grad school. I said, I think I want to go into arts management right before the auditions. And, lo and behold, I did the auditions. That's one half of a story, but I came back and I started taking business classes that were offered at the college. I was only one in the class pretty much. So there's that. But I always had an inkling, even from that age, and of course going back, that I wanted to get into arts management. At the time, I developed a business plan for Richard L's Ensemble, and it was going to be a school for the performing arts. It was not going to be just any school. It was going to be a school that taught the performing arts, but integrated all of the important life skills and development skills that young people need just to be productive citizens. But we were going to do it as through the arts. Hence, I went to graduate school in arts education, then said, no, I also need to do arts management. Came out of there, worked in arts education, American Place Theater in New York City, convinced my boss that we should have this program in Washington, D.C. He said, Lisa, whatever you want to do, you're going to do it because there's no way I'm going to stop you. This is my boss, Wynn Handman, who was the artistic director of American Place Theater. And I said, Wynn, thank you so much. And I brought that program here and I hustled. I called the Kennedy Center. I said, this needs to be on your stage. They're like, what are you talking about? We've already I didn't know anything about a booking season. I was like, well, I don't know. But I took a chance, and they actually put my show in. They inserted it in the program, and it was in the arts education program because it was a program for young people. You couldn't tell me nothing after that. I was working so hard to build the legs to have something solid in Washington. And Derek Gordon, who was vice president of education at Kennedy Center, tapped me on the shoulder, Lisa. And I'm like, I'm busy. What are you doing? I need you to think about something else. What about the Villar Institute for Arts Management? I said, that sounds amazing, but I really got to focus on this because I've got goals. And he's like, you're not paying attention to me. This could catapult your career in ways that you quite can't imagine probably. I said, okay, let me check this out. He said, it's invitation only. I'm inviting you. What more do you need, girl? And I said, okay, let me not be crazy. And I applied and, I got in, and it was a wonderful program led by Michael Kaiser. Fast forward to my last rotation, I was with Debbie Allen. She was doing Pepito's Story at the Kennedy Center, and I was a company manager. I took on the role of a company manager. And, company manager's contract's a big deal. So I was just trying to do my job right. I didn't want any problems. I wanted to do it right. And then, one day I got the attention of Miss Allen, and I said, do you remember me? She's like, oh, you are here, aren't you? Are you working on my team? Because, I'm just standing in the back of the studio, And I said, yes. And I had worked with her before. She did some choreography when I was at Spelman, and she remembered me from that. And I said, yes. And she says, wow, okay, I see you. And I said, Ms. Allen, before you go, can we meet? I'd really like to talk to you about your school. I'd like to know more how you're doing it. Sure, we had lunch, something. We talked and talked. I had 1,000 questions for her because, I was super smart. I was so smart. I was coming out of the Villar Institute for Arts Management. You couldn't tell me anything. And I was 20-something years old. So you know how smart I was. And I say that in all the good ways and the challenging ways. And so I said, I would ask her all these questions about her business. And she says, one day, this is fantastic. You're going to be great. We had wonderful engagement. One day I'm home and the phone rings and she's calling me on the phone. And I'm like, Miss Allen. She's like, yes. You remember all those questions you used to ask me, and I need you to just come do it. And I said, what? Are you offering me a job? Essentially, she said, yeah, if that's what you want. I went out to Los Angeles. I was the first executive director of Debbie Allen Dance Academy. It was a remarkable year of learning and growth. And I ended up leaving California after doing a full contract under that, coming back to Washington, and worked in literary arts at Penn Faulkner Foundation, but still with young people in schools and leading them. And then I got to the DC Arts Commission as a producer, and I was in charge of all the events that the commission produced. And at that time, it was pretty kind of standard city events. No shade to any of my colleagues. But I came in there and I said, no, we're going to big this thing out. And we did. We ended up producing over 50-something individual projects in a given year, and they were excellent. I had a real understanding of community drive, what the people need, what the artists need. And so that was a really special time because I've always been in production, but mostly either performing or things like that, but this was a different side of it. And it's like producing. And then I was like, oh, this is kind of what this is. Oh, I like this a whole lot. I did that. And then I started working more in the administration of the Arts Commission, which is about grant making for the city, essentially. Eventually, I worked my way up to be a deputy director. My boss said, I've been appointed director. I won't go back unless you come. I said, okay, I'm going back in. I was deputy for a long time. And then I became interim director of the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities until I left and started running a scholarship foundation and mentoring all the kids who wanted to go in the arts. So that was a little longer than 3 minutes, but it's the shortest version I've told. Mm-hmm. It's a bit linear, but that's my journey. And then I represented one of my dear friends who's an amazing cellist in terms of helping him get bookings in this region before I came to APAP. And it's good. Fun times.
The one real through line that I keep hearing is you advocating on your own behalf.
Absolutely.
Over and over and over again. Stepping up with Miss Allen and saying, give me your time.
That's right.
Which led to you coming on with her. And it is your advocating for yourself, which is so incredibly important. That has led to your continued development and progress.
And the arts taught me that. I learned that by practicing the arts, the dance, Horton technique, ballet, tap, jazz, learning lines for a show, participating as an ensemble member in any show, singing. Can you actually believe I was singing? I learned that because it's an intrinsic sense of motivation that I've always probably had, but I told you I was really shy, so you would never know it. Had a lot going on internally, but the arts is what gave me the confidence to let you see who I am, because you had to show yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You have to show your vulnerability. You have to get out there and try. They would always say, if you're going to mess up big. But don't just go half mess up. What good is that? Go be big, go, push yourself, because that's how you cross the footlights. Mm-hmm. I mean, just to think very practically as a performer, you want to get to the audience, you got to cross those footlights. And to cross those footlights, you have to be laser focused on what is your intention and what is your action. Mm-hmm. And, that's straight drama speak. But and that's how it is truly, because so showing yourself, right? Being comfortable enough and confident to say, this is my process, and this is what I'm hoping to achieve. And knowing that the worst that could happen is you fall down. But I've gotten back up a lot of times, because we fall down a lot in dance. You trip, you fall, you have injury, and you get back up. So that kind of real physical application, I think, is so critical in helping to develop, really confident people who do have the power and the confidence, to advocate for themselves, which is why we're the perfect advocates, artists.
Right. One aspect of advocating for yourself is obviously putting yourself out there. And you came into APAP at a very interesting time where advocacy was key, which was during the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. What was your experience like coming into an organization whose largest event is an in-person gathering and not being able to actually facilitate for the first 2 years as an in-person event?
It was pretty scary. I mean, I wasn't afraid when I took the position. I was very confident because I had a sense that, I've worked with cities and people, and I said the most important thing is we've got to come together and we've got to figure out, innovative ways to do that. And I liked a challenge. So, the key thing for me was we have to come together. We have to have a rhythm and a structure to do it. We didn't know if we were going to be able to go to conference or not at that time. That was known my second week on the job. Mm-hmm. Like, let's look at this contract and see what really is expected and what's the health recommendation in the world right now. But it was scary because I don't think I really understood the power of APAP. And when I started to really understand, our members taught me. They said to me, Lisa, if I don't connect or have my booth, I'm going to lose my business. It's done for me. And so many people told me that. And it was, it's sincere, a lot of fear. But what had happened, because we had lost so much, we were leveled. And so when we say level, you level with someone, you're honest with someone. You level with someone, you're starting from the beginning and building a relationship. You're saying, this is who I am, no frills attached. This is what I need. And when I begun to understand the importance of APAP and its central role in the presenting, booking, and touring industry, I knew it, but I felt it, because what had happened is many of us lost our people lost their businesses. And I saw that right in front of my face. I saw the Zoom screen, which was often, someone in tears talking to me, trying to figure out with me how we were going to get this done. And I said, wow, I've got something really important that I have to do. And then I started to learn that people didn't quite understand the performing arts as a business industry or anything, because I had people, just lay people who I've known all my life, saying, I can go to my church or my synagogue and it's open now, but like, why can't I just go to this theater that I've been going to? I've been a subscriber to forever and ever. I said, because there's nothing in the can. They're behind. We couldn't finish our work. And people said, what? And I said, the can, shows in the can. I have to explain. Oh, well, how does a show get in the can? Perfect education opportunity to show people, to teach them how this industry works, and also to share with them the power of APAP and why it's so important to the industry. And it was an aha moment. I said, wow, if you care about the performing arts, then you have to care about APAP. And I wrapped my whole being around that understanding. And I said, we got to figure this out. So what did we do? We did a virtual conference, because we have to do something to keep going. And I was very determined by that. We started a monthly membership meeting cycle called Real Talk in Real Time. And people still join. We still have that going. We did the best we could. And believe me, I lost half my budget in my first week on the job, because the board had yet to meet and we hadn't approved the budget. And so they waited for me to come and do that. I said, okay, I don't know about babies in bathwaters, but I'm going to do my best here.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very challenging time, but it was a time where we leveled, and the leveling allows you to focus, to get really clear on what's truly important. And it was a time where there was a reckoning of how we were working together, how we were treating each other. Where was our inclusion or lack thereof? Where was the sense of belonging or lack thereof? And because of the leveling, again, we were ripe for honesty and ripe for really working to adjust those things. And so APAP had its work in doing that. Others had their work. And so it was a really beautiful time, in spite its trials and tribulations. It was a beautiful time of really understanding who we are at our core. And again, what is our real purpose?
In starting to dig into what is your real purpose, at what point did you decide to do the study and the evaluation that led to your sustainability plan? Mm-hmm. That you released, and how did what prompted the decision to dive into that, and how did that then develop?
Well, I tell you, when I lost half my budget, APAP's business model, essentially about 70, I always forget if it's 3 or 8, because I'm looking at the curve and I can't see if it's a curve to make it an 8 or make it a 3, because these are early numbers. But, over 75% of APAP's budget came from conference and membership. And when I lost that, we had some members, but we had, free and reduced pricing. We had conference, but it was online. We weren't you going to come here, what, $100 maybe, if that. Yeah. And then we just had to be generous to people, right? So I lost all of that. And I said, wow, these things can happen again. And I think we all had to come to that realization. And how do you future-proof your organization? Well, I said, first of all, we're going to have to do a full-on strategic plan that will, because we were at the end of our strategic plan anyway. So APAP was at the end of its strategic plan. It had, it's different goals were laid out on the website. I was very familiar with them. I bought into it. I was hired around those goals, but we were at the end of it. And so it was a ripe opportunity. We needed to figure out what is the business model that will help to sustain this organization, which is key to sustaining this industry. How do we do it in a way that speaks to not just, sustaining it for kind of just being a service organization, which can be here or there or anywhere, but really being a field leader? How do we do it? And so we had that, that was the reality. I could not sustain this organization the way in which my membership expected at half the budget. It just was not going to work. So that was very, 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 very critical in terms of the input this is what's happening, and we've got to find our way forward. So we endeavored in bringing on a consultant who was, worked with us. I think it was 9 months. It was like birthing a baby. It was not quite a year, but I think it was 9, maybe 10, the baby who doesn't want to get born,
Mm-hmm.
It was beautiful. We worked with so many of course, our board, our staff was involved. Members were involved, different consortia and groups. And we came back with some real key things that we needed to clean up so that we could be sustainable, because sustainability isn't just about finding a dollar. You got to do the internal work to be worth the dollar, because you're talking about member value and what people value and where they see themselves in your organization and what they're willing to do to be a part of it. What is it going to take? So we came back with 3 focused areas. One was that we needed to fix. One was we needed a stronger identity and positioning. One is we needed to really think about member value and how that aligns with our identity and position. And then we needed to innovate inside of this organization around revenue generation, because we didn't have enough sources. Now, you remember we are a service organization. And, I went to arts management school, and you're always taught that as a service organization, you don't really raise money. You don't compete with fundraising that your members, for example, is trying, But how are we supposed to sustain ourselves? It's so strange. The point is that we have to carve out a niche for ourselves around fundraising. Part of what we have as our new vision statement around not just our mission, which is represented by the action of conference, but the vision, which is the impact of conference. It allows us to create a new space, because we're not a producer, we're not a presenter, we're a convener and a sustainer. And people know what it means to have lost this industry. And they need to also understand the institutions that are key to sustaining the industry, and supporting them is just as important as the individual entities themselves. So that was the thinking and the rationale. And then it was about the actual activities, what's going to come up under that. So it's a 5-year plan, because one of the other things we learned, our team worked all through COVID. People were exhausted. As a field, as a world, we've just taken people through so much. They have had to do so much, show up in ways people have never expected. And so the first thing was also acknowledging that we were going to truly need to be thoughtful. You should do it anyway. But in the arts, we like to go fast, and we're used to working a show. So we're like, okay, it's been and we like to put on a good show, even if what's behind is a mess. And I didn't want to put on a good show. They kept telling me I can't, warning me. I said, well, how long is it going to take us to look fantastic? And they said, and then the planner, she said, I think 5 years. 5 years? I don't have 5 years to look fantastic. She says, Lisa, let's be real. These are the things you're going to have to address. How quick do you think you can actually do that? And you've got to keep enough of your business going. Your field doesn't want you stopping a conference and so you can pay attention to some sustainability plan. I said, you're right about that. So we have to accept that long-range planning is a thing, and it's important. And so we're in this now.
So how did you then launch into the execution of that strategic plan? Once it was all in place and it was laid out and you knew, here's our end goal, here's where we want to be in 5 years. How do we launch into this?
The first thing we did is we brought on some new operational team members to help us build out the necessary positions for the organization that I felt were imperative to move us into sustainability. And the biggest shift in that is we developed a business development department. And it's so cool because it's about, like I said, remember, we used to talk about professional development. We said this before we were recording, but we talked about professional development, and we talk about that a lot in the field, and that's fine, but that's not the end all to be all. At the end of the day, the purpose of the professional development is so that our businesses will function well and survive and thrive. And so it's a small repositioning, but it has a lot up under it. It's business development. It's business development for APAP too. We're trying to look at how do we integrate what we do, not just for the sake of, oh God, get this muscle going so we can produce a conference, and after January 10th or 12th or 3rd, whatever it is, we're done. And then we build the cycle all over again. That's not enough. That's A to B. That's B. C is our ability to stay connected to our community, to see the successes that they're having in the communities that they're having, to help them be the busiest buildings in each of their towns and cities, because that is the performing arts, and that's what we are, and to give them those resources and tools around advocacy, technology, and all of the things that are now comfortably being integrated. At least we're talking about it more readily. And so we had to shift our operations to be able to support that. And we had to figure out how to do some things quickly. So I said, if it was me, the arts would be running for president. The artists would be, because look how we bring people together.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the room. We cut through the noise. When people are, the international world is doing what it's doing, we're fine. I'm good with, our festivals are working, our international, there's another conversation to that. But my point is that the shared humanity that we have is a beautiful thing. And it's one of the only things where most people will agree the arts are very important. They're beautiful. Whether you see it aesthetically or, or any other ways, it has the capacity just by its structure to bring people together like nothing else and not separate people. One of the challenges I think we have had in this current climate is, people say they feel separated. They don't feel like everything's for them. They feel apart. We're not the United States. Under the arts, we can be, because the performing arts bring us together under very humanistic ideals, and it brings out the best in us. When I say the arts running for office, it's because we need that level of inspiration, and we need a mechanism that can bring us together as a people of this country. All of us, every last one of us. The sense of belonging where all of us have a space, and that's what we do well. Now, that whole philosophy, that's like running a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And so I staffed my office like that. I brought in people who work, one person at least, whose experience is in political campaigns. And some really, prominent people, I'll just leave it like that, who know how to galvanize key topics that all of us can sign on to, not just some of us, but all of us, and quickly build strategy and communication strategy to get that messaging out, to grab attention and bring people on board. We can do all of this, but if we don't have people on board, it's for naught. And that's the second step. We spent a lot of time, especially this year, because we're building the internal structure, laying out what it is. The next step is really the collateral, showing people, inviting them in, finding their space, their unique space, and how this goes. Where does it really support their needs today? How does it help them future-proof for tomorrow? Those are very important, running an association. And it's also a very strategic approach because, again, we cannot afford to put out things that are not going to bring APAP something that it can then continue to build upon. And it, so, we're looking at sponsorship tied to programs, all kinds of things, as opposed to, in isolation. Everything needs to work together. And it's a good opportunity for us to practice what we want our field to do, which is don't just think of your work singularly. And not to say people do that. I mean, we're smart people. We know this stuff. But as a concept, a construct for us to really engage, it has to spread laterally. It has to spread over to business development. It has to spread over to civic engagement. It has to spread over to advocacy. It has to spread over to health and wellness. And so we're really taking on all of those key themes and demonstrating inside of the organization how we can even leverage the programming that we have and help people get to that messaging and get to that ability to kind of synthesize for their survival.
Mm-hmm.
So we build our departments around business development, which includes fundraising, even more fundraising. We have a very beautiful fundraising strategy. It makes me so excited because it honors our birthplace of Wisconsin. It looks at our history, because I'm a big believer in from whence you came is very important to invite people into where you're going. And so we're going back to our origins in Madison, Wisconsin, actively, and inviting them into the new APAP because it's new to them. Many of them knew Fan Taylor. They knew what she was trying to do, and they're so excited to see where 70 years later we've landed. And so we want to bring them in, and then we want to tell the story. And because they knew our origins, they're so excited. And they said, well, I want to tell more people. I said, please do.
So as you're moving forward, as you're growing, redefining the organization itself as far as the business organization, not necessarily the mission, how do you continue to serve members in a consistent way amidst all of that change?
There's a delicate balance between knowing when something's urgent and you need to get into it, and then having a long range strategy. And it's not an easy one to strike, especially when you're in the building. We're not in the full executing. So it's like, gosh, I had a blind spot over there because I'm so busy trying to build. It'll be a lot easier once we get some of this stuff really settled inside of the organization. But the reality is that what we're talking about for the building pieces, especially around business development, is for the now. People are going to have to pivot to that now. That's not just, 10 years from now. The environment of the performing arts has changed dramatically. Many of us had depended on federal funds, including APAP, and many of us no longer receive federal funds for a variety of reasons. Many of us had depended on funding from foundations, and foundations are not all the same, but many of them are also trying to figure out their direction, and they have new challenges to address based on the environment we're in. And so I say that because the resources, let's say a presenter, Josh, let's take you. I don't know your particular situation, but I'm hearing that the resources to present the way in which people used to present are not there. We've got visa issues and challenges with international travel for artists and presenters and producers and companies and people crossing the waters for touring. Mm-hmm. We've got all these challenges. And so if someone said to me, our field members, I'm going to probably lose 75% of my roster and agent. I don't know what I'm going to do because the roster is international. And
additionally, you have international acts that no longer want to come into the United States within its current political status.
Absolutely. And then there's that. And we can get to that too a little bit because I've been working on some of that. But the reality is that we don't know when those things that we counted on as fixtures of our business structure, we don't know if they're going to come back, and if they do, what form they're going to take.
Or how long it takes for them to come back.
Yeah, and I'm just a person, it's just how I'm wired. I've never been one to the milk has spilled. I'm ready to plant some, how do you make milk? Make some
mainly
new
with cows. Yeah. Those are really hard to plant, but
I should be a vegan. I'm ready to plant some new cows because by the time, some people are really on that milk, that spilled milk, but and it has a lot of weight to it and it's important. But I run a membership organization. At the end of the day, when you've come up from realizing that milk has been spilled, and you will now say, well, now what? And I got to have something for you. That's my job. So like when all this stuff was happening, like February, I cried one day. Oh my God, that the world is changing. It's going to be so hard. And then I said, can't cry no more. I got to figure out new paths. I had members texting me, oh my God, what's going to happen? Funding is dry. Oh my God. I said, new paths. This is spoken like a CEO. I had one of my members. I said, well, absolutely. Because if I lose hope, then what's the point? And that's what drives me to get up every day and come to this computer, because we work remotely at APAP, and work with our team to get this stuff in the right direction. These strategies that we're talking about around advocacy, around fundraising, around unlikely partnerships, this is for the now. And if we don't seed it now, someone else will. If we don't help shape AI now, others will, and we'll just be on the receiving end of it. So while we've lost so much, there's so much that's nascent. And, a lot of us have done this work in many years, create, arts is, we have these ways of talking about the arts and the impact outside of just the arts. And we've done it. The creative economy was a whole thing. I think of the early 2000s, but we didn't figure out a way to keep us sustaining. It allowed these unlikely partners into our realm, and they were able to say, is like a lot around real estate development, but it did not truly benefit us where we actually were able to rise up. And that's the difference.
Tune back in next week for the second part of this interview with Lisa Richards Toney.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
Danielle, you want me to send you one of these $16 mics that we recorded this interview on?
You said they sounded good.
If you listen to today's, that was Lisa's.
Yeah, Lisa
she sounded good.
Do you want to just send me the link?
Sure, I can send you a link.
Is it on Amazon?
Yeah.
I've been boycotting Amazon.
Okay.
Maybe I'll try to find it somewhere else.
Do you want me to just ship you one then, and then you don't have to?
No, because you still buy it on Amazon.
No, I already bought it on Amazon. I've got 7 of them.
Oh, okay, then yeah.
Already given Amazon the money.
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos got his cut.
Today's program is brought to you by Amazon. I don't know what their catchphrase is. But.
The devil's smile. It's like a little smile, which it doesn't look like a smile to me. On the side of the box, their logo is a smile. It's supposed to be a smile.
It's not. It's A to Z.
Yeah, but it's also meant to be a smile. Yeah. Like it from A to Z, but it's curved like a smile.
Oh.
So I heard someone call it the devil's smile the other day, and I was like, oh, I'm using that.
So tomorrow morning, I'm having lunch or breakfast with both Mojo and Ken Waldman.
And Josh will finish that story on the other side of this break. That's called a cliffhanger. Get you to come back. First, we have to tell you about Amazon. Amazon gets all our packages there on time.
Not mine.
The devil's smile. Go ahead, Josh.